I held him within 5 minutes of him being born.
Are you surprised by the love you feel for baby Eric?
I actually said to Lauren beforehand, what if I liked the dogs more than him?
The world watched in stunned silence as Simon Cowell walked away from the Britain's Got Talent stage for the final time, his voice cracking with emotion as he announced his immediate retirement from television. The man who had dominated the entertainment industry for decades was stepping away at the height of his career, and the reason behind his shocking decision would leave millions of fans heartbroken. His 11-year-old son, Eric's devastating medical diagnosis, had forced Simon to make the most difficult choice of his life. What the doctors told Simon about Eric's condition changed everything, and the entertainment mogul's emotional farewell would mark the end of an era that nobody saw coming. The diagnosis that changed everything. The morning that shattered Simon Cowell's world began like any other Tuesday in September 2025. Eric had been experiencing what seemed like routine childhood growing pains, occasional headaches, moments of confusion, and a subtle change in his behavior that only a father's trained eye could detect. Simon had initially attributed these signs to the natural challenges that came with Eric's autism spectrum diagnosis. But when the symptoms intensified and new ones emerged, alarm bells began ringing in his mind. The appointment at the specialized neurological clinic in London was meant to be precautionary. Simon had insisted on the most comprehensive testing available, calling in favors with medical professionals across the globe to ensure Eric received the absolute best care. The MRI scans, blood tests, and neurological examinations stretched across several days, each test more complex than the last. Simon maintained his composed exterior during the medical procedures, but those close to him noticed the tension etched in his face and the way his hands trembled whenever he thought no one was looking. When the results came back, the conference room at the medical center felt like the coldest place on earth. The team of specialists delivered news that no parent should ever have to hear. Eric's brain scans revealed a rare degenerative neurological condition that would progressively affect his cognitive abilities, motor functions, and ultimately, his life expectancy. The condition, occurring in fewer than 1 in a million children, was particularly cruel because it targeted children who were already facing developmental challenges. The doctors explained that Eric's unique neurological makeup, already different due to his autism, made him particularly vulnerable to this devastating condition. The irony was heartbreaking. The very differences that made Eric special
I've also got a shirt for Eric.
Hey, what do you think?
also made him susceptible to this rare disease. Simon listened as medical professionals outlined treatment options, experimental therapies, and the reality that even with the best care money could buy, Eric's condition would continue to progress. What devastated Simon most was learning that Eric's time for creating meaningful memories, learning new skills, and experiencing joy would be limited. The window for father-son adventures, quiet conversations, and shared experiences was closing faster than anyone had anticipated. The diagnosis didn't just change Eric's future, it obliterated Simon's carefully planned vision of watching his son grow into adulthood. The weight of this information hit Simon like a physical blow. This wasn't just about managing a condition or adjusting expectations. This was about accepting that his beloved son faced a future filled with uncertainty and decline, suddenly found himself facing the most impossible decision of his life. The secret Simon kept from the world. For weeks following Eric's diagnosis, Simon Cowell became a master of deception, maintaining his public persona while privately crumbling under the weight of devastating news. The filming schedule for Britain's Got Talent continued, and millions of viewers watched Simon deliver his trademark critiques and witty remarks, completely unaware that behind his confident exterior lay a father whose world had been turned upside down. The energy required to maintain this facade was exhausting. Between takes, Simon would retreat to his dressing room and stare at photos of Eric on his phone, studying his son's face for signs of the progression that doctors had warned him about. The makeup team noticed that Simon required more concealer under his eyes each day, evidence of sleepless nights spent researching experimental treatments and reading medical journals that offered little hope. Production assistants began noticing changes in Simon's behavior that seemed subtle but significant to those who knew him well. The man famous for his perfectionism and attention to detail was making uncharacteristic mistakes during filming. He would forget contestants' names, lose track of conversations mid-sentence, and occasionally stare off into space as if his mind was somewhere entirely different. Simon's assistant started receiving unusual requests: meetings with medical researchers, consultations with specialists in countries most people couldn't pronounce, and urgent travel arrangements to facilities that specialized in rare pediatric conditions. The normally organized schedule became chaotic as Simon tried to balance his professional obligations with an increasingly desperate search for answers about Eric's condition. The most telling sign of Simon's internal struggle was his relationship with contestants who reminded him of Eric. Children and young adults who displayed any form of neurodiversity or special needs received an unusually gentle treatment from the typically sharp-tongued judge. His criticism became constructive rather than cutting. His feedback focused on encouragement rather than entertainment value. Behind the scenes, Simon was quietly liquidating assets and redirecting his vast fortune toward medical research and experimental treatments. Properties were sold, business investments were cashed out, and entire divisions of his entertainment empire were restructured to fund what had become his singular mission: finding a way to slow or stop Eric's condition. The isolation of keeping such a devastating secret while maintaining a public career took its toll on every aspect of Simon's life.
Yeah, I was a little bit apprehensive, but within 2 seconds.
Friends noticed his absence from social gatherings, his reluctance to make future plans, and his new habit of ending conversations abruptly when they touched on topics related to family or the future. The moment Simon broke. The breaking point came during a live taping of Britain's Got Talent in late October 2025, in a moment that would later be described as the most emotionally raw scene ever captured on the show. A young performer with autism had just finished an extraordinary musical performance that brought the audience to their feet. And as Simon prepared to deliver his feedback, something inside him snapped. The contestant, barely 12 years old, possessed the same intense focus and unique perspective that Simon recognized in Eric. As the child stood on stage, beaming with pride at his accomplishment, Simon saw his own son's face reflected back at him. The realization that Eric might never have the opportunity to experience such moments of triumph and joy hit Simon with overwhelming force. Television cameras captured the exact moment when Simon's composure cracked. His usual confident posture deflated, his hands began trembling visibly, and tears that he had been holding back for weeks suddenly began streaming down his face. The live audience fell silent, sensing that something profound was happening that transcended the usual drama of a talent competition. For nearly 30 seconds, Simon sat in complete silence, unable to speak or move, while the weight of Eric's diagnosis crashed over him like a tidal wave. Fellow judges and production staff looked on in shock as the man known for his unshakable confidence appeared to dissolve before their eyes. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of vulnerability from someone who had built his career on being invulnerable. When Simon finally found his voice, it was barely above a whisper, and his words seemed to come from a place of deep personal pain rather than professional obligation. The feedback he gave to the young contestant was unlike anything he had ever delivered on television, deeply personal, emotionally charged, and filled with an urgency that suggested he was speaking to someone he might never see again. Production was halted as Simon excused himself from the set, leaving behind a confused audience and a production team scrambling to understand what had just happened. The footage from that moment would become some of the most watched and emotionally impactful content in television history, though viewers wouldn't understand its true significance until much later. In his dressing room, Simon made the phone call that would change everything. His business manager, expecting to discuss scheduling conflicts or contract negotiations, instead heard Simon announce his immediate retirement from all television commitments. No explanations, No negotiations, no gradual transition, just a simple declaration that his career in entertainment was over, effective immediately. The entertainment empire crumbles. The announcement of Simon Cowell's immediate retirement sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry that reverberated across continents. Television networks that had built their programming around Simon's shows faced immediate crises. With billions of dollars in advertising revenue and international distribution deals hanging in the balance, the man who had single-handedly created multiple television franchises was walking away without warning, leaving chaos in his wake. Emergency board meetings were called at television networks across Europe and America as executives tried to comprehend the financial implications of Simon's sudden departure. Britain's Got Talent, The X Factor, America's Got Talent, and numerous international versions of his shows represented a media empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The sudden removal of the central figure who had created and maintained these properties left industry leaders scrambling for solutions. Contestants who had been preparing for upcoming seasons found their dreams suddenly uncertain. Production companies that employed thousands of people faced potential layoffs and project cancellations. International broadcasters, who had paid massive licensing fees for Simon's formats, demanded explanations and contract renegotiations. Simon's business partners, many of whom had built their careers around his vision and leadership, found themselves abandoned without explanation. The man who had been known for his loyalty and long-term business relationships had seemingly vanished overnight, leaving behind unfinished projects and unfulfilled commitments that represented years of planning and investment. The ripple effects extended beyond television into the music industry, where Simon's record labels and artist management companies faced uncertainty about their future direction. Recording artists who had been developed under Simon's guidance found themselves in limbo, unsure whether their contracts and career plans would remain valid under new leadership. Most shocking to industry insiders was Simon's complete withdrawal from all business communications. The man who had been accessible 24 hours a day, who had built his reputation on being directly involved in every aspect of his empire, suddenly became unreachable. Phone calls went unanswered, emails were ignored, and even his closest business associates found themselves unable to contact him. Financial markets reacted swiftly to news of Simon's retirement, with entertainment industry stocks experiencing significant volatility as investors tried to assess the impact of losing one of the industry's most influential figures. The uncertainty surrounding the future of his various properties created a domino effect that touched everything from television ratings to music sales. Behind the scenes, Simon was methodically dismantling the business empire he had spent decades building, converting assets into liquid funds that could be directed toward Eric's medical care and research into his condition. The entertainment industry that had made him famous was being sacrificed entirely for the chance to save his son. The desperate search for hope. With his entertainment career abandoned, Simon Cowell embarked on a global mission that consumed every resource at his disposal and pushed the boundaries of medical science. The fortune he had accumulated through decades of television success was now being directed toward a single goal: finding a treatment, cure, or even just additional time for his son, Eric. Private jets carried Simon to medical facilities in countries most people had never heard of, seeking consultations with researchers who specialized in rare pediatric neurological conditions. The desperation driving his search led him to experimental treatment centers in Switzerland, cutting-edge research facilities in Japan, and underground medical practices in countries where regulatory oversight was minimal. Simon's approach to finding help for Eric mirrored his approach to building his entertainment empire: aggressive, comprehensive, and willing to take risks that others wouldn't consider. He funded entire research projects, provided grants to universities working on related conditions, and essentially bought his way into the most exclusive medical circles in the world. The transformation in Simon's priorities was absolute and startling. The man who had once obsessed over television ratings and recording contract details now spent his days studying medical journals and attending conferences on pediatric neurology. his vocabulary shifted from entertainment industry jargon to complex medical terminology that he absorbed with the same intensity he had once applied to discovering new talent. Medical professionals found themselves dealing with a client unlike any they had encountered before. Simon's combination of vast financial resources, entertainment industry connections, and desperate paternal love created opportunities for collaboration that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Research projects that had been stalled due to lack of funding suddenly received massive infusions of capital. The global search for answers took Simon to facilities that existed on the cutting edge of medical science, places where experimental treatments were being developed that wouldn't be available to the general public for years or decades. Some of these treatments offered hope, others proved to be dead ends. But Simon pursued every possibility with relentless determination. His willingness to fund research extended beyond treatments that might help Eric specifically. Simon began supporting broader research into pediatric neurological conditions, autism spectrum disorders, and rare genetic diseases, understanding that breakthroughs in related fields might eventually benefit his son. The Simon Cowell Medical Research Foundation was established quietly, without fanfare, channeling millions of dollars into projects that had been underfunded for years. The emotional toll of this quest was enormous. Each promising lead that ended in disappointment, each experimental treatment that failed to show results, each researcher who ultimately had to deliver bad news, added to the weight Simon was carrying. The hope that drove his search was also the source of continuous heartbreak as potential solutions proved elusive. The final goodbye performance. November 15th, 2025 marked a date that would forever be remembered in entertainment history as the night Simon Cowell gave his final performance, though the audience had no idea they were witnessing the end of an era. The special episode of Britain's Got Talent had been hastily arranged as a tribute to Simon's unexpected retirement, with production teams working around the clock to create a farewell worthy of his contributions to television. The emotional weight of the evening was palpable from the moment Simon walked onto the stage. His usual confident swagger had been replaced by something more measured and deliberate, as if he was savoring each step and trying to memorize the experience. The audience sensed something different about their beloved judge, though they couldn't quite identify what had changed. Throughout the evening, as various performers took the stage to honor Simon's legacy, cameras captured moments of vulnerability that revealed the depth of his emotional transformation. When young contestants who reminded him of Eric performed, Simon's composure would crack just slightly, showing glimpses of the profound sadness he was carrying. The most powerful moment came when Simon was asked to address the audience directly, sharing his thoughts about his retirement and his plans for the future. What emerged was not the confident entertainment mogul the world had known, but a father speaking from a place of raw emotion about love, family, and the things that truly matter in life. Simon's words that night were carefully chosen to honor his career while hinting at the personal crisis that had driven his decision to retire. He spoke about the importance of cherishing time with loved ones, about the privilege of witnessing extraordinary talent, and about the responsibility that comes with having a platform to influence others. The standing ovation that followed Simon's farewell speech lasted for several minutes, with audience members and fellow performers unable to contain their emotions. Many in attendance later described feeling that they were witnessing something historically significant, though they didn't fully understand the personal tragedy that had motivated Simon's departure. Behind the scenes, production staff who had worked with Simon for years were struggling to contain their own emotions. The man who had been the driving force behind their careers, who had created opportunities for countless people in the entertainment industry, was walking away from everything he had built. As the cameras stopped rolling and the audience filed out of the studio, Simon remained on stage for several minutes, standing alone under the lights that had illuminated his career for so many years. Those final moments of solitude, captured by security cameras but never broadcast, showed a man saying goodbye not just to his career, but to a version of himself that could no longer exist. The Secret Foundation and Mission. In the months following his retirement announcement, Simon Cowell quietly established what would become one of the most significant medical research foundations in modern history, though few people outside the medical community were aware of its existence or scope. The Eric Cowell Foundation for Pediatric Neurological Research was funded with the majority of Simon's entertainment industry fortune, representing a commitment of over £300 million to finding treatments for rare childhood conditions. The foundation operated with a level of secrecy that was unusual in the charitable world, focusing entirely on results rather than publicity or recognition. Simon's approach to medical research funding mirrored his approach to entertainment production, demanding excellence, expecting rapid progress, and willing to take risks that more traditional funding sources wouldn't consider. Research grants from the foundation were directed toward projects that showed the greatest promise for treating not only Eric's specific condition, but a range of rare pediatric neurological disorders. Simon understood that breakthroughs in one area of research often led to unexpected discoveries in related fields, so his funding strategy was comprehensive and far-reaching. The foundation also established a network of communication between researchers around the world who were working on similar problems, creating collaborative opportunities that had never existed before. Scientists who had been working in isolation suddenly found themselves part of a global team with unprecedented resources and support. Simon's personal involvement in the foundation's work went far beyond simply providing funding. He attended medical conferences, participated in research meetings, and developed relationships with scientists and doctors who were working to understand conditions like Eric's. His transformation from entertainment mogul to medical research advocate was complete and irreversible. The urgency driving the foundation's work was evident in every aspect of its operations. Traditional grant cycles that might take months or years were compressed into weeks. Research projects that showed promise received immediate additional funding. Clinical trials were fast-tracked through regulatory processes using every legal means available. Behind the foundation's work was the painful reality that time was limited. Eric's condition meant that any breakthroughs needed to happen quickly to have a meaningful impact on his life. This deadline pressure created an intensity in the research community that was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The foundation's impact extended beyond just funding research into creating hope for families facing similar diagnoses. Parents of children with rare conditions suddenly had access to cutting-edge treatments and experimental protocols that wouldn't have been available otherwise. Simon's personal tragedy was being transformed into a source of hope for others. The final chapter. As 2025 drew to a close, Simon Cowell had completed the most dramatic life transformation in entertainment history, evolving from a television personality into a full-time father and medical research advocate. The man who had once lived for the bright lights and applause of television studios now found his greatest purpose in quiet moments with Eric and in supporting the scientists working to understand his son's condition. The entertainment industry continued to feel Simon's absence, with ratings for his former shows declining and competitors struggling to fill the void he had left behind. Yet for Simon, these professional losses seemed insignificant compared to the privilege of spending unlimited time with Eric during what medical professionals had warned might be their most precious period together. Eric's response to having his father's complete attention was remarkable and heartbreaking. The boy, who had always been somewhat reserved, began opening up in ways that surprised everyone around him. His autism spectrum diagnosis, which had once seemed like a barrier to communication, became less significant as Simon learned to understand and appreciate Eric's unique way of seeing the world. The daily routine that Simon established for himself and Eric was carefully designed around Eric's needs and preferences, creating an environment of stability and predictability that allowed the boy to thrive despite his medical challenges. Every activity, every conversation, every shared experience was treasured by a father who understood how limited their time together might be. Medical updates from Eric's treatment team provided a mixture of hope and realism that Simon had learned to navigate with remarkable grace. Some experimental treatments showed promise, others proved ineffective, but Simon's commitment to exploring every possible option never wavered. His approach to Eric's medical care was as thorough and determined as his approach to building his entertainment empire had been. The transformation in Simon's priorities was complete and irreversible. the man who had once measured success in terms of ratings, record sales, and business profits, now found meaning in Eric's smile, in quiet moments of connection, and in the knowledge that he was doing everything possible to support his son's journey. Friends and colleagues who knew Simon before Eric's diagnosis often remarked on the profound change in his demeanor and outlook. The sharp edges that had made him famous in the entertainment world had been softened by love and shaped by purpose. His legendary impatience had been replaced by the kind of gentle presence that Eric's condition required. As the year ended, Simon faced the future with a combination of hope and acceptance that few people ever achieve. While he continued to fund research and pursue every possible treatment option, he had also learned to find joy in the present moment and to appreciate the unique gifts that Eric brought to their family despite his challenges. Simon Cowell's journey from entertainment mogul to devoted father and medical research advocate represents one of the most powerful examples of love triumphing over personal ambition in modern history. His willingness to sacrifice everything he had built professionally for the chance to support his son through an unimaginable medical crisis shows us what true success really means. What do you think about Simon's incredible sacrifice? Was he right to abandon his entertainment empire to focus entirely on Eric's care? How would you handle such an impossible situation with your own family?